Kansas State just got some great news about a player that's staying in Manhattan, one of the breakouts from the second half of the season.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Now part of the number one sports podcast network, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com, place your NFL live bets all season long. NFL Sunday was crazy. There's no doubt about that. Happy Monday to you all listening to Locked On Kansas State today when we drop this one. We got a fun episode for you today, a little mixed bag Monday, if you will. We're going to dive into women's and men's basketball as they get the wins in Creighton in a Big East Big 12 showdown. And then we're going to talk about the news that just dropped over the weekend with Joe Jackson sticking around. He has committed to remain in Manhattan for 2026. A lot of good stuff to discuss on today's episode. And that's exactly where we'll go there. It was reported on another podcast and an interview that Joe Jackson will stay. He will be sitting around and staying with Colin Klein for the new future. And that's big news. That's fantastic news. Now, if we would have had this conversation in the first half of the season, we would have said, okay, maybe this isn't the biggest of news. But what we saw with Joe Jackson break out after really all the Dylan Edwards drama came to an end, he turned around and completely just changed the entire feeling we had about Joe Jackson heading into this offseason. Now, for the record, before we dive into Joe Jackson's thing, I still think that running back needs to be addressed in the portal. And that is not just the fact because of Joe Jackson. It's just because it's very small. There's only going to be 4 returning players, not including some of the freshmen that we got in the 2026 class currently on the roster based on how the portal looks right now. And that could obviously still get even worse because what we know now is one running back will return to Kansas State in 2026, and that is Joe Jackson. Joe Jackson almost got to 1,000 yards on the season without really being the number one running back until the second half of the year. That's how great of a second half of the season Joe Jackson had. And of course, we all know what happened in the Utah game, breaking the Darren Sproles record and now sitting as the top running back in Kansas State football history for most yards in a single game. When you put yourself in the same category as Sproles, no matter what the category is, you have a little bit of taste of Kansas State legacy, a Kansas State legendary, type of player, if you will, in Joe Jackson. He's going to always be seen as a record holder now. You just beat a Sproles record. So the fact that he's sticking around is really exciting. And of course, you have to find these small victories with Colin Klein. And of course, the excitement behind the Colin Klein hire is great. And in the long term, it's going to be fantastic. I think there could be a short-term hiccup. 2026 could be either a great year or it could be a worse year than what we have right now. But you'll still see a lot of improvements and a lot of things to be excited about. I don't think, even if the record next year is worse than 6-6, which I don't think it is, but if that possibility occurs, I don't think we will be in the same situation where we feel upset about it like we do in 6-6 this year. And let me explain to that real quick. What I mean is that this year it feels so disappointing because this team should have been 10-2, 9-3. But they find out being 6-6. Obviously, the issues going on with the running back position, Dylan Edwards, Joe Jackson, obviously a big issue with that in the first half of the season for sure. Go all the way back to Dublin, week 0. If the same thing happens in year 1 of Colin Klein, with all this crazy turnover, with him trying to build a staff that's more focused on relationships than talent right away, I think you can take a lot of positives from it, even if you are 5-7, like Baylor was this year, or something along those lines. For the record, not expecting that to happen, but just kind of putting it in perspective. This is a great win, although it might be seen as a tiny win, and stacking tiny wins is very important in this world of college athletics. This is a great win for Colin Klein's new coaching staff for 2026. You have your running back 1. You got to go find running back 2, possibly even running back 3 in the portal and build around it. Now, you do have a couple other players that are still around. As of right now, there are 3 other running backs, not including the 2026 recruiting class, still on the roster. Antonio Martin will be a senior. Obviously, Joe Jackson will become a junior. You have Devon Rice, who will become a sophomore. and Montario Elliston, who will also be either a sophomore or a redshirt freshman, depending on what his status is after this season. He was a true freshman this season, depending on if he decides to redshirt or not. That is yet to be officially determined at this moment. So you have 4 running backs on the roster right now. Obviously, Dylan Edwards redshirt and left the program in the middle of the season, and JB Price, after the season, decided to hit the portal. So you still have to make some attacks. You still have to make some sort of improvement to this running back room. And honestly, I would love to have that type of shifty running back, that quick running back, the Dylan Edwards type running back as your 1B or your 2, not the 1A or your running back 1 that we entered the season this year as. If Joe Jackson is your true running back 1, you have a shifty, speedy guy. First person that comes to my mind, and I've said this a couple times on the show, Rayshawn Luke from Fresno State. He was with Arizona 2 years ago, with Fresno State this past year. I mean, if he hits the portal, that guy screams perfect running back too, to tandem with Joe Jackson. If you can get that type of running back, and then what you saw from improvements from Antonio Martin, maybe as your 3rd running back, if Devon Rice, he had some moments of shine, can be your 3rd running back, I think you're in a good spot. If you can get a speedy running back that can also maybe act as a kick returner, because special teams U is back, folks, I think you could be in a really good position. Transfer portal is going to be absolutely wild in January for Kansas State. We are less than a month away. We're really like 2.5 weeks away from the portal being absolutely insane. And now that we're not playing a bowl game, it's going to get absolutely nuts for Kansas State in the next couple of weeks, especially when Colin Klein is playing double duty right now, being the offensive coordinator of Texas A&M during the college football playoffs. Overall, though, really love the fact that he is returning. I think this just takes one more step in the right direction. One of the biggest concerns I had about this offense was retention for 2026, because you didn't have a lot to hang your hat on from the season before that. The retirement of Chris Kleiman, the bringing in the new energy, the new old blood, if you will, the new old school of Colin Klein, bringing him in, I think could potentially help that retention. Now, there's going to be obviously a couple other players we're going to focus mainly on, and we're going to dive deep in those positions in the next couple days. We're going to start with quarterbacks tomorrow. But Avery Johnson obviously being the main decision here. We haven't heard much of Avery Johnson other than the fact that Colin Klein said he had a conversation with him. We haven't heard much about him yet. 2 weeks until the portal opens up, and we've got a lot of Avery Johnson radio silence. Is that good news or bad news, right? Sometimes no news is good news. But obviously, when you're talking about quarterback 1, there's a lot to be going on. If you're paying attention to social media on Monday morning, you saw multiple big name quarterbacks in college football hit the portal. Dylan Raiola, Brendan Sorsby, a couple of those big names. DJ Lagway. And of course, you already had Sam Levitt. There's a lot of big name quarterbacks entering the transfer portal. What does that mean for Avery Johnson in the future? Does he decide to test his luck, or does he now think that the right decision is to remain with Kansas State, remain with Colin Klein, the person that helped to recruit you to Manhattan in the first place? I think the more of those big name quarterbacks hit the portal, the better the chances that Avery Johnson sticks in Manhattan. That's just personally my opinion on that thought process. I'd love to see a shifty running back to add with Joe Jackson here. What he did at the end of the season was absolutely incredible. Obviously, the 293 yards against Utah was absolutely insane. And then the 142 yards against Colorado. Those final 2 games of the season were incredible. I mean, you're talking about having, 450 yards basically in the last 2 games? That's unreal. Half of his yards basically came in the last 2 games of the season. Now, if you can continue that momentum, this all stems back to, we've heard this story before, Christian. If you can go back and push this momentum from last season, the last 2 games, bring it into the new year. We said the same thing about Dylan Edwards with the Rutgers bowl game, for the record. But if Joe Jackson can do this, then you're in really good shape moving forward. The offensive line figured something out, obviously, towards the end of the year. You'll have a new offense, of course. But there'll be a lot of things to hang your hat on moving into the new season. So a lot of things to be excited about when your true running back 1 is saying, I'm coming back. I'm not hitting the portal. I like where it's at here in Manhattan. So exciting stuff. Again, this is where the small, tiny wins start. This is where the momentum starts to build. We talked about momentum all last offseason. You got to find it again this year. And now it's a completely different way to find the momentum because you have the excitement and then you have momentum. They're completely different things. How do you get them together? The excitement of the new hirings, the excitement of the new coaching staff, and then the momentum of the players actually saying, you know what, I'm committing to this new staff. That's how you get them together. Joe Jackson helps put that piece together right here on a bright and shining Monday morning here on Locked On Kansas State. Let's dive into more. Let's talk more conversation here about the Kansas State. Let's switch over to basketball because it was a good weekend for Jerome Tang and the men's basketball team. They got a win against the Creighton Blue Jays, and that could put them in the right direction, right? We hope so. We'll talk about that next right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, the holidays are officially here, which means gift hunting season is on. And if you want something meaningful, personal, or guaranteed to get a reaction, well, Aura Frames is a gift that delivers every time. It's not just something you wrap, it's the way you share memories. Because Aura isn't just your average picture frame. You can preload the frame with photos before gifting it. So when you plug it in, those memories are already there. There's no apps to figure out, no setup headaches. It's just instant smiles, and that's the best part about it. Whether it's you're giving it to grandparents, parents, newlyweds, just anyone who loves photos, it's endless uploads of photos with 30-second and 30-second videos through the Aura app. Packaging comes gift ready, no price tags, no wrapping needed. It's a huge win, especially when everyone is so busy this time of the season. So for a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver Map frames. It's named #1 by Wirecutter by using promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's aurframes.com. Promo code COLLEGE. This deal is exclusive to listeners and frames sell out fast. So order now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Again, promo code COLLEGE at auraframes.com. Terms and conditions do apply. Thanks for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen of the day, and thanks for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it up another level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayers Club today and get Locked On Kansas State with no interruptions, member-only Discord access, and so much more. All for just $5 a month and $50 a year. Go to lockedonkansastate.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes below to learn more. Exciting stuff happening for Jerome Tang and his basketball team this weekend with a big win over Creighton. Exciting stuff. You know, obviously it's been an up and down season for Jerome Tang and for Kansas State, and the transfer portal, of course, for the second year in a row. You get excited and then it kind of falters and then you get excited. It's been a peaks and valley type of season, kind of like how Big 12 play felt last year, kind of like how the non-conference felt last year. You couldn't get any momentum. Well, this last win against Creighton, for the record, Creighton isn't having the best season at all. They're 500. They're 5-5. It's not the same Creighton that you expect to have, right? Many people have Creighton usually in like their final four in brackets. Not this year by any stretch of the imagination, but you did hand them their first home loss of the season. You take an 83-76 victory, and the biggest storylines here, I think you have to go Abdi Bashir. He was amazing. He had, I think, 5 3-pointers in the first half. Unreal. 18 points in this game. He had 12 points, I believe, in like the first 4 minutes. He was unreal. Abdi Bashir had a great game. David Castillo, 19 points. He was unreal off the bench. I think we have to start having the conversation. Do we want to keep having David Castillo come off the bench? Those 23 minutes could be utilized elsewhere, but I do like the energy. We've had this conversation in the past. Getting Abdi Bashir and David Castillo going off at the same time is definitely a great feeling. PJ Haggerty had another down game, though. Only 10 points, 4 for 12 from the field. He was 0 for 2 from beyond the arc. Thankfully, other players stepped up for him. Now, in the presser, Abdi and David Castillo both said that PJ was playing selfless basketball, and the fact that they were putting a lot of pressure on him opened up the other players to make big shots. If that's the way they're going to play, if they're going to play selfless basketball, and this is how you win, then fine. Okay, great. Hopefully that's the case. Hopefully NBA scouts see that he's willing to be a facilitator and just make that work for their team to win games, because that's If you can do that, the fact that PJ Haggerty came to Kansas State, he mentioned it wasn't just become a scorer, just to prove that he can put the ball in the hoop. It was to prove that he can do other things inside of his game. Maybe this is one of the keys. Maybe this is something that we can pay attention to moving forward. Moby Ike Aruke, was in a walking boot. He did not play in this game, did not really have an update for him after the game as well. Something to keep in mind on that one moving forward. But overall, Kansas State moves to 7-4 in non-conference play. I think their biggest, toughest non-conference challenges are out of the way. This is still not the best way to finish your non-conference, or at least head into Big 12 play at 7-4. And of course, you got, I think, 1 or 2 more games left in non-conference, 2 more. And you have South Dakota and UL Monroe over the next couple Saturdays before you take on BYU on January 3rd to begin Big 12 play. And for the record, BYU is currently ranked 10th in the country. Just to kind of put in perspective before we kind of finish up this conversation here, the first 2 games you have in Big 12 play, as of right now, and this obviously will change just a couple weeks later, is against number 10 BYU and number 1 in the country in Arizona. The Big 12 is absolutely loaded this year, folks. I think 5 teams currently in the top 25, with Texas Tech filling out the top 25 for the 5th team. I think they are 19th currently. Iowa State ranked 4th. And we mentioned Arizona ranked 1, BYU 10, Kansas 17. It's insane. It's actually Texas Tech is 19. And then, of course, Houston being ranked 8th. Thought Houston would completely run this Big 12 conference this year. They might be the 3rd best team in the conference. I mean, it's unreal. So if you can continue and finish off, you must go 9-4. You have to win the last 2 non-conferences. Those are non-negotiable. After the loss to Bowling Green, after the loss to Seton Hall, really the Bowling Green one is the one that hurts the most. But after those 2 losses, you cannot afford to lose to South Dakota. You cannot afford to use to UL Monroe. You can have to head in two Big 12 play, 9-4, and then hope to go 500 in Big 12 play. If you go 500 in this crazy good Big 12 play with maybe stealing a victory against one of those ranked opponents, like a BYU, Arizona, a Kansas, or even an Iowa State, right? If you can find a way to do that, then I think you're in a really good spot to get to the NCAA tournament in March. That has cooled off quite a bit after the Bowling Green loss. That definitely cooled off after the Seton Hall loss. This Creighton win proves that when you are shooting on top of your game, the first half, when you were amazing in shooting, no one can stake up with you. This is the second time we've seen that this season. The first half against Creighton on Saturday, Kansas State was electric. You couldn't stop them. They were so good in their shooting. We saw the same thing happen with Cal earlier in the season, where they just couldn't get stopped. If you can find a way to make that happen for 2 halves of a basketball game, and you do that in Big 12 play, you will upset some of these teams. Whether the defense catches up or not. Defense is getting better, might I add. But whether you have good defense or not, if that shooting continues to shine as great as it did in the first half of Cal, in the great first half of Creighton on Saturday, if you can find a way to put that together, if you had the first half of Cal and the first half of Creighton and that was one game, that beats a BYU. That beats an Arizona. That's insane to think about, but that is absolutely true. Because you can be the best team on the court, but if the other team's not missing, you're going to lose the basketball game. And Kansas State can prove that they can do that. They just haven't proved they can do it consistently enough. So that'll obviously be the thing that they look for to wrap up their non-conference play this Saturday against South Dakota, the following Saturday to finish up the year, and to finish up non-conference play against UL Monroe. Both of them are going to be in Manhattan. So no more traveling. Actually, no more traveling until January 7th against number 1 ranked Arizona. The next 3 games will be in Manhattan, South Dakota, UL Monroe, and BYU. Really like what I'm seeing from David Castillo. Really like what I'm seeing from Abdi Bashir. Doreen Buka is starting to step up and look really good. Really liking what we're seeing from Doreen Buka. There's a lot of really exciting things to like about this team right now. It's just the consistency that's the biggest question mark. And what can we get answered over the next 2 games before you have that tough start to Big 12 play. There's nothing wrong with starting Big 12 play 0-2, knowing you have to play BYU and Arizona. But if they are blowouts, then that's what's wrong. If they're respectful losses, because they're going to both be seen as quad one losses inside the conference, if you can prove that, okay, maybe we can run with these guys, then you're in good shape. Because after Arizona, you got Arizona State, UCF, Oklahoma State, Utah, 4 of the predicted towards the bottom teams in the conference. So if you can get any type of consistency and hype in those first 2 games of Big 12 play against BYU and Arizona, you could go on a run and win the next 4 before you host Kansas in Manhattan. Heading in to that game against the Jayhawks in Manhattan, a game that you split last year with them, and you're 4-2 in conference play, that's a lot of good momentum. So hopefully that's where they can lead to moving forward. Got to see more from PJ Haggerty. I think that's a big thing that I need. I want to see a lot more from PJ Haggerty. Obviously, the nation's leading scorer only having 10 points in a game is not going to cut it. If that selfish basketball thing is one thing, selfless basketball thing is one thing, great. But I'd like to see more. He's currently not the number 1 shooter in the country anymore. Now, because of his couple games that have been off, he's now 2nd in the country in scoring, 22.7 points per game. He's had 2 off games. He had a bad game against Seton Hall where he only had 11, and this game against Creighton where he only had 10. In the middle of that Mississippi Valley State, when they won 108-49, he did have 28 points. But what good did that game do for anybody other than maybe getting the confidence back under Kansas State? We'll see how that looks over the next 2 non-conference games of the season. And it wasn't just the only win in Creighton for Kansas State. Both the women's and the men's left the Big East Big 12 showdown with a win. And the women's team, if you're confused about the men's team this year, the women's team is so confusing. Patience is definitely the key word in that one, though, because there is a lot to be excited about, but maybe making to the dance might be a step too far in the right direction. We'll talk about that to wrap up this show on this Mixed Bag Monday right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is the best when the game starts to shift. If a receiver gets hot, defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump in right at the right moment with live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly. Player props update as the guys heat up. And of course, my favorite, those same game parlays, those SGPs. It just continues to be fun with FanDuel. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Well, this first year of women's basketball for Kansas State without Serena Sundell, without Ayoka Lee for Jeff Mittie, has been interesting. There's no doubt about that. And now he finishes up his first non-conference schedule without those 2 stars, without their Sweet 16 team. And this is not the same Sweet 16 team that got there this past season. Finishing the non-conference play 7-6 with some pretty interesting wins, but also some interesting losses on the season. 7-6 is definitely an interesting record, no doubt, especially the way they started. They started off 3-0 on the season. And then now, if you look at the Big 12 standings, they're technically 3rd from last because some of these teams inside the Big 12 haven't lost a game yet. There's actually 4 teams in the conference, Arizona State, Iowa State, Texas Tech, and TCU, that have not lost a single game this entire season. And it's a very interesting conference so far. Speaking of TCU, that's the next one on the slate. Both of these men's and women's basketball teams start Big 12 play against tough teams. The men with BYU, TCU with the women's side. That'll actually be just in a few days as they start on the 20th and start their conference play sooner than the men's. They'll play 2 games before 2025 is over, TCU and Cincinnati. But the women's get a win in Creighton as well. They take down Creighton 75-71. And they get a nice win against Creighton. Creighton hasn't had the best season as well, just like their men's side. They're 4-5 on the season. They've lost 3 games at home now. But Kansas State really steps up and gets this. Nasha Klassen's 21 points in this one, was 8-11 from the field. They really drove the paint. They did a really good job with her in this basketball game, and it was ultimately the deciding factor. They had a really solid first half. They kind of struggled in the fourth quarter. Kansas State did. Creighton came back a little bit, but they found a way to hold on and win that 4-point victory. Taryn Sides with only 9 points in this one, was only 2 for 4 from behind the arc. Kansas State overall 40% from the 3-point land, 8 for 20. Not bad, not terrible. Like to see that increase a little bit more moving forward. But that's just kind of taking the nitpicking here. You know, you were pretty even in the rebounding department. You obviously are trying to find the small victories with this young and improving team. You look at the turnovers. You won the turnover battle by 2, 15-13. 13 still a lot of turnovers, but that's enough to keep you in this game and win. When you look at some of these other games that Kansas State has had this year, I mean, you lost to South Dakota on a buzzer beater. That was a hurtful loss. It was probably one that really stung and kind of changed the entire trajectory of the season so far. And then you win against number 13th ranked Ole Miss by 1. You do lose by North Carolina, the 12th ranked team of the country. And then you lose to San Diego State just the game before Creighton. It's been an up and down season for non-conference play for Kansas State, for Jeff Mittie, for Taryn Sides, for all of these players returning from their Sweet 16 run. Not many, as you mentioned here. So what I like to say, and we've kind of talked about this with the women's basketball team all offseason long heading into the year, is patience is key. And patience hasn't even remotely been the word it's underused because, of course, just being over 500 entering Big 12 play, you have to have patience. Now, you're going to have to probably have a pretty decent Big 12 record to get yourself into the dance this year. And I think it's possible. Obviously, we'll see what happens against TCU. We'll see how they look against Cincinnati. Cincinnati's not having a great year so far this year. They're 5-6. If you can finish 2025 with a winning record, that means you split the next 2 games at the very least, then I think you're in a good spot. And you have to find a way to get those small victories. And I think obviously having maybe a win against Cincinnati to finish 2025 would be big. But if you are expecting this team to get back to the Sweet 16, maybe don't hold your breath. But pay attention to this team because they are getting better, even though the results might not always look that way. They're getting better every single game, and it's exciting to watch this team build and just continue to get better over and over every single basketball game. And hopefully, in this new era of NIL and transfer portal and all that good stuff, that means that they continue to build into next season, not get good enough to then just leave in the portal. That's like my biggest concern of this team is hopefully they can build upon it and say, you know what, let's run it back for next year instead of maybe pieces leaving in the portal, which is probably bound to happen. But either way, Kansas State gets 2 wins in Creighton over the weekend with the women's and the men's team taking down victories in the Big East Big 12 showdown. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of Locked On Kansas State. Really appreciate you, as always, tuning in to Locked On Kansas State. Tomorrow, we're going to dive a little bit into quarterbacks, the entire state of the program, if you will, the state of the position, we'll call it. And we'll dive into quarterbacks unless something crazy breaking news pops up on Monday night. That'll be our show tomorrow. So make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On Kansas State so you can get all the latest episodes. You can find it on Locked On Kansas State on Twitter, TikTok, you name it. And of course, we're everywhere you listen to podcast on audio and on YouTube. Hey, also, did Locked On Kansas State make your Spotify Wrapped? If so, prove it on social media, because if you do, you can secure a 3-month brand new Everydayers Club. Just tag the National Locked On Podcast Network account on any social network, and we'll drop you a code. So be one of the first to join the Everydayers Club to get your favorite show ad-free and exclusive access to members-only Discord channel. For those of you who are on video, we'll send you the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel on audio. Make sure your second listen of the day is Locked On College Football. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you back here next time, right here on Locked On Kansas State.